Welcome back to the DGD podcast. As always, the NCDGD himself, Robert Reynolds. Today, we're going a little bit off topic here, and we're going to be covering some Gamecock football. And with me, none other than the infamous Mike Yuva. And I said that right. He has to pronounce it on his Twitter. Gotta love it. But look, he's more than just a Gamecock insider, guys. He's a Bojangles fiend like myself. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, the Yuva. If you're not familiar with it, stick around, you'll understand. And we're going to talk some Gamecock football, recruiting. Look, there's a lot of things here that if you've been with us for, the entirety of the show, you'll understand. Last year we had Chris from the Spurs Up show. Shout out Chris. And he mentioned some things about South Carolina that caught a lot of people off guard. But if you were with us, you would understand that you were not caught off guard and you were expecting this. So I'm looking forward to talking with Mike and picking his brain about the Gamecocks and all the offseason hype. None other, though. I'm going to let him introduce himself. Mike, welcome to the show.
I appreciate it. Happy to be here.
So, obviously, before we get started talking food and talking Gamecock football, just let you know, guys, join our Discord today, discord.gg/Bones Brigade. All teams are welcome. Gamecocks, if you're listening, feel free to join. And also feel free to join our Patreon, patreon.com/DGD podcast. Show is also brought to you by La Terrain. Use code DGD at checkout. Get 10% off your purchase site-wide. All right, now it's bow time. All right. Mike, first off, me and you've talked about this offline, right? Both Bojangles fiends. I think you even had, at one point, if I'm not mistaken, social media, right? Having to tell Spencer Rattler, which we're going to talk a little bit about, going to talk about his starter option for Bojangles.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you're sponsored by them, I believe.
That is correct.
Look, I'm telling you right now, but I'm sorry if you've never had Bojangles, guys. I promise you're living under a rock, and you need to get Bojangles around you. And so, did he take that advice to heart, though? I got to ask, though.
We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see. And for those of your listeners that are hearing me, I mean, I'm a Yankee. I grew up in Boston, so I didn't even know what the heck Bojangles was probably until like 6 years ago. I mean, I've been living in the South now for 7. First job in TV was in little old Greenville, Mississippi, for our listeners that know where the Delta is. So complete culture shock going from right outside of Boston, going down to Greenville, Mississippi, going right into SEC country, covering Dak Prescott's senior year and Swag Kelly and Ole Miss going to the Sugar Bowl. But shoot, I got here in 2016. I didn't know what the heck Bojangles was. And the more and more I learned about it, the more I wanted to check it out. And then fortunately, the great mistake of them screwing up my order turned into be a moment that I'll probably years from now kind of be like my Al Bundy moment. I'll be telling people like, yeah, I had a biscuit named after me at Bojangles. They're like, all right, pal, good for you. Kind of like, Al scoring those 4 touchdowns in that state championship game at Polk High. So that's what it feels like for me.
I love it.
That's what it feels like,
No, so obviously, if you're not familiar, I called it here earlier. It's called the Yuva. Sorry. If I'm not mistaken, walk me through it, but it's a Cajun filet biscuit.
Correct.
With pimento cheese on a bowberry biscuit.
I know. And some people listening to you are probably going to be like, that sounds absolutely disgusting. Like, look, I ordered it, the Cajun filet with pimento cheese on it, and they accidentally put it on a bowberry biscuit. And, I'm the type of guy, if anyone follows me on Twitter, I mean, I like to bust balls. I like to have fun. We like to break stories, but we like to have fun. We like to keep things lighthearted. But, my biggest thing is, I like being able to dish it out. You got to be able to take it too. So we like to have fun. Some people are a little bit more sensitive than others, but then again, that's the world we live in today. But
no, you're absolutely right.
Point being is, I tweeted it out. I said, this is a wild combination. And the crazy thing is, for me at that point, this happened a year ago. Shoot, maybe 2 or 3 months earlier, I broke the biggest story of my life. I broke the news that Will Muschamp had been fired. So I had more Twitter interactions, Twitter followers than I've ever had before. So there was more eyeballs on my Twitter page. And because of that, people went out, started ordering this crazy concoction. And the next thing you know, a couple of days later, I mean, the lines in Columbia, I kid you not, were wrapped around the Bojangles, especially the one next to Williams-Brice, right next to the football stadium. It was insane. And it got to a point where I think in the first 2 or 3 weeks, 11 different states had ordered the Yuva.
Nice.
So Bojangles named it to their unofficial menu. They actually, the funniest part about it all, and I can just it makes me laugh. Just the idea of someone going out and they have a really nice photo. I think I was telling you behind me, you can kind of see it. They had these posters all over South Carolina. I think like at 30 or 40 restaurants. The fact that someone actually went out there and did a photo shoot with this thing just makes me laugh. And we had commercials about it. It was just really neat. It was really neat because, like I said, for a guy that didn't even know what the heck Bojangles was until, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, to be being sponsored now by them, having commercials, having a poster outside I mean, it's just funny. But it's been really neat. They're awesome people. We've been able to actually do a lot of good for the community too, with being able to feed underprivileged students, and it's been good. It's been a good partnership. But the point being is, it's one of those moments that I look back at. I'm like, I could have been a jerk about it and complain. But it's like, no, you're having fun, and the next thing you know, Gamecock Twitter ran with it, and it became a thing, and multiple states kept ordering it throughout the whole
History writes itself at that point.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna use a line by the infamous Bane. You adopted it. I was born in it. Look, I grew up eating, but basically just biscuits all the time when I went to Bojangles. And when I was in college, I went to UNCG, and the Cajun filet biscuit grew on me, but with egg and cheese.
Yep.
In the meantime, what I've learned is you can throw a piece of sausage on it, and you talk about the combination of flavors on that. Surprisingly good. But I think, you talk about Bo-Berry biscuits, and this reminded me too. I don't think there's anything sweet and savory like a Bo-Berry biscuit with a piece of sausage in between of it. Look, if you're a beginner at Bojangles, I suggest you get your feet wet before you hop into this menu. But there's a lot to learn about it. So Spencer, if you're listening to this, start with Supremes, focus on maybe bacon, egg, and cheese, and then work your way into the Uva, stuff like that. Promise it works. But enough about this, right? We could talk Botom all day. Let's talk Gamecock football. Tadil says, "Hey, y'all, go Dogs. Welcome to the brigade. As always, if you're a Gamecock fan, you are a part of the Bones Brigade today. Just letting y'all know. Bones Brigade is our live chat. First question here. Biggest news of the offseason for South Carolina. Spencer Rattler. What's the vibe? What's the feel around Gamecock football with that? And you also got tight end Stogner, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's the overall feel and vibe about that?
I think what it's doing more than anything, it's just bringing that buzz, it's bringing that excitement, and I think it's a tricky place to be, especially being on this podcast. It's what Georgia was able to do this year is just absolutely tremendous, and you have to give a lot of credit to Kirby Smart and just that coaching staff of really being able to bring guys in from a recruiting standpoint and being able to develop them right. Well, what we're going to see is, and especially with South Carolina, they're doing things a little bit different. They're going to go through the transfer portal, but that's something we're going to continue to see, not just at South Carolina. We're going to probably see it at Georgia. We're going to see it at other schools. And that's not to say it's not a slight of anything. I mean, if anything, that's a testament of what you're doing from a program standpoint, that people want to come to your school when they take that second opportunity to go through the recruiting process. So I say that because I feel like just some people, when they hear, transfer portal, we're too good to do that. I know that Clemson for a while, they felt that way. Oh, we don't have to go through. Well, that's just the reality that we're in right now. And if you don't want to adapt, just like anything in life, you're going to be left behind. So Georgia obviously is in a more stable situation, I'd say, than South Carolina was going into the offseason. And of course, they were able to win a national championship, and that will give them some momentum heading into this year. And from a Georgia standpoint, you hope that will be able to carry some momentum moving forward. But for South Carolina, what it allows, especially for a guy like Shane Beamer, most coaches come in and it's just like, all right, it's going to take maybe 3 years, right, to be able to get your own players in there and to get things kind of turned around. This allows you to be able to compete a little bit quicker. And I think in the world of college football and college athletics, for that matter, you need to be able to win now. I just think that's just the reality of it. Boosters, athletic directors, presidents, fans, I think the patience level is so much thinner now than it's ever been before. So if you have the opportunity to take advantage of the transfer portal, bring guys in there that you feel like can make an impact right away, number one, that's going to be able to help your program. But number two, it's going to be able to put yourself in a situation where you don't hopefully have to wait 2 years, 3 years, even 4 years, depending on the situation that you're in. So I think more than anything, look, it's crazy how much one game can change everything. the buzz, potentially the transfers that South Carolina has acquired this offseason. If they had lost to Vanderbilt, if the grad assistant that came on in, Zeb Nolan, played
Colonel
quarterback,
Zeb.
if he does not lead South Carolina down the field against Vanderbilt, South Carolina ends the season at 5-7, and that last taste in their mouths is a 30-0 loss against Clemson. Well, they were able to win that game. They go 6-6. They're able to head to their first bowl game in a couple seasons, and they're able to beat North Carolina. And you're able to get that momentum, and now you head into this year at 7-6. You have arguably one of the biggest free agent, if you want to call it that, free agent acquire one of the biggest free agents with Spencer Rattler, and you look at some of the other players they have as well. It gives that buzz. And I've been here since 2016. You talk to people that have been around this program. I mean, I had to talk with Marcus Lattimore. I mean, the buzz right now, it has not felt this way in a long, long time. And that's not to say the standard right now or that buzz is the same as Georgia, right? The expectations, the bar, different right now. But the point being is the program is heading in the right direction. And to be in the situation that they're in, compared to where they were at a year ago after coming off 2 seasons where they had a combined 6 wins in those 2 years, it definitely makes a lot of these Gamecock fans and the team feel good heading into this new season.
No doubt about it. I mean, you look at and me and Chris talked about this last offseason, right? We did a a record prediction, and we both had called it 6-6. Now that 6-6 in the regular season came in a different way that we both expected. But at the same time, 6-6 for first year with Shane Beamer, that's massive considering where you were with Will, right? When Will was fired and everything like that, which leads me to a comment here. Obviously Will leaves, gets fired, everything like that, and then comes to Georgia as an analyst. And look, from a Georgia perspective, we're glad to have him back in that role. Look, I love Will Muschamp as well. I love him, but he's not a head coach. He's just not good, elite play caller, just not a head coach. And I think you saw that, at Florida. You saw that at South Carolina. But he definitely built relationships. Tying that in, though, you look at Shane Beamer. Shane Beamer is a coach's guy. He builds those relationships, strong relationships. And for them to go, for South Carolina to go 6-6, that is a huge upgrade and a very, very good start to that era. Looking forward to this year. Now you sit there, you get what arguably the highest quarterback ever in, per ranking standpoint, right? With Spencer Rattler, you get Stogner. And I think that comes back to his ties at Oklahoma, but nonetheless, look, like you said, you got to adapt. And what a better way to do it than getting one of the best transfer quarterbacks this offseason. So that was huge, which obviously is going to make the Georgia game a little bit more, I wouldn't say confusing. It would definitely make it more entertaining. All right, we look at what, like you said, Georgia was just on a different level and, all the way through the regular season, obviously winning the national title. And even the guys that left, if you paid attention to the combine, you understand what was going on. Like, it just, I don't know if Georgia, I do think Georgia would do it, but the level of talent compared to everybody else, Georgia's just on a completely different platform. And that's no knock to, South Carolina at all. That's definitely, I would say for them to, to be 6-6, that's a huge start, right? You can't base your season off of playing in Georgia. You just can't do that. You'd be crazy to see that. But, my thoughts from a third party standpoint, I think the hype and the buzz, I think it's legit and I think it's warranted. Looking at what you bring back, right? Look, everybody needs to remember this. Shane Beamer went 7-6 total with really a Muschamp roster, and it wasn't even that great. It was depleted as hell. Give him some time. I'm telling you right now, South Carolina could be, I would say, fighting for a top 3 spot if you're not careful, right? I think, looking around the SEC, Florida's down, and we'll see what happens with Napier. The verdict's out there. Definitely can't sleep on Kentucky, right? But South Carolina is one of those teams, especially if they can get the most out of Rattler. I think you could definitely see that 7-6 final, and especially that win in the bowl game, though, especially against North Carolina. That's a momentum changer for the next season, this upcoming season. That's a big deal. It's a big, big deal, which will transition over here. Week 3. I have a feeling it's going to be a night game. Will he be? It's kind of a tough place to play. We'll see what happens, obviously. What are your thoughts on that game? I know we talked a little bit. Like, it can make sense for it to be a game day type field, depending on. I have to look around the NCAA, but that environment, if things go as well in the first 2 weeks, you could honestly see a nighttime game. Will he be? Look, I don't care what anybody says. Sandstorm, it can get annoying to you, but it's effective. And the white towels, it's effective. Obviously, even with Muschamp there, things like that, I picture Spurrier, Willie B. Spurrier days. That play, you did not want to go there and play. Like, it was just one of those things where, like, you didn't know what the hell was going to happen. You could ruin your season easy, right? What are your expectations for that game in particular? What are you looking to see when Georgia and South Carolina play week 3? Because that opens up the SEC conference play for both teams as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're South Carolina, you could say this any year about any team in the SEC, but I mean, it's a gauntlet of a beginning of the season schedule. I mean, you have a non-Power 5 team that you're playing in week 1, but then the next 2 games you're playing at Arkansas, then you got to play home against the defending national champs with the Bulldogs coming into town. So I think if you're South Carolina more than anything, I mean, look, I'm not trying to sell them short, but I mean, there could be a strong possibility that they start the year 1-2, and yet still be able to have an opportunity to finish with 7 or even, dare I say it, 8 wins in the regular season, depending on how things go. Because when you look at the offense from a skill standpoint, they have so much talent this year. They really do. The biggest question mark is going to be something that they have struggled with, it feels like, since I've been down here in 2016 covering the team, which is, what are you going to get from the offensive line? But I've said this for a long period of time, going back to December when Spencer Rattler transferred into South Carolina. The beauty about Rattler is he's kind of like makeup. He can cover up a lot of blemishes that this offense has. So you don't need to have All-Americans across the board in the offensive line. Does that help? Certainly. You don't need to have All-Americans at wide receiver or running back. But the thing that South Carolina does have is they have a quarterback that has a great arm. He's a great arm. He's a great quarterback. And I think there's a lot of people that get caught up with the headlines and they see, okay, Spencer Rattler got benched at Oklahoma. Well, I mean, if anyone had followed Caleb Williams coming out of high school, I mean, they were anointing him kind of as the next big thing. And obviously we'll wait and see how things play out for him as he transferred out from Oklahoma. But the point being is, you have a very talented guy coming in there, and that's what happens in life. I mean, we've seen it happen in college football. This isn't like the first time. But I think the fact that, going into the season, you have, Rattler, as a guy that was on that short list of, Heisman favorites going into the season. And it's easy to look at that headline, but he's still a hell of a quarterback. He's still a guy that went out there and earned plenty of awards his freshman year in that conference. So I think when you have a guy like that coming in here, number one, he's got talent. But number 2, he has a chip on his shoulder, which is the size of, goodness. I mean, you pick something, right? I mean, it is freaking huge. So, what I'm more interested more than anything is, what is this offense going to look like? Because with the injuries, I mean, South Carolina started 4 different quarterbacks last year. I mean, think about that. 4 different quarterbacks.
Crazy to think that.
And 4 different quarterbacks won games. I mean, that is an insane stat. So, what does this offense look like with second-year offensive coordinator Marcus Satterfield? Does the offensive line, can it make those adjustments? Because you have everyone coming back. So, Gamecock fans like, oh, who are we going to bring in from the transfer portal from the offensive line? Well, that's not always the easiest fix. Sometimes the easiest fix is just to look at, okay, what did we have last year? What can we do to correct it? And now that you have them all coming back, that rapport is strong. I mean, there's no other position on the field that you need everyone to be in sync, quite like the offensive line. So the fact you have all those guys coming back, they understand what that offensive scheme looked like last year. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that you had a dual threat quarterback get hurt the second week of training camp. And now you have to move things around. You don't have that mobility at quarterback that you thought you were going to have. And, it's obviously it starts with the coaching staff to be able to make those adjustments. But I think with South Carolina, they were put behind the 8 ball to begin with. And I think they were able to figure things out as the season went on. But I feel like just going into this season, what we saw from an offensive standpoint, it might be the complete opposite. I mean, they start spring football up in 8 days on the 15th of March, and then the spring game is going to be on April 16th. Who knows how much we'll actually see during that spring game. But the
True.
point being is I would not be shocked to see South Carolina come out and try to spread it out a little bit because they do have those weapons now. Now, weapons that need to prove themselves in the SEC. But, I mean, you have Antoine Wells coming in from James Madison, one of the top FCS receivers. I mean, I had an opportunity to talk to
James Madison. If you're not familiar, James Madison, I think won a FCS championship last year.
They're one of the best FCS programs, and they've been consistent. He goes out there and he sets the record for receiving yards for a career, receiving touchdown. He top 3, but he's setting records left and right in just like 2 seasons of play there.
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
He's a guy that has been getting a lot of looks by NFL teams already. So he has the ability. The question now is, what is he going to do once he gets to the SEC? And that's not to downplay the SEC or anything like that, because I know SEC purists hate when you say, oh, we get it. Okay, it's great. Fantastic.
Yep.
But at the same time, too, there's a guy that transferred in from my little old college, Assumption, Division II, and he played for South Carolina this year at nickel, and he did a hell of a friggin' job. So the point being is, if you're good and you have an opportunity to show yourself on the field, it can happen. I don't care what school you played at beforehand. So
it doesn't even matter if you're a scholarship player or a walk-on. Think about this. If you're a Georgia fan, now, Mike, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Dan Jackson, number 47, played safety.
Mm-hmm.
First game against Clemson, early second quarter, we see 47 out there. And for me, I'm sitting there like, who the hell is this? And then I sit there and I do some research, and the kid was playing good, right? He's playing really good. Do some research. Damn walk on playing at safety against Clemson, man. And at the time, obviously we didn't know what Clemson was about last year, which we'll talk a little bit about more of that. We didn't know about Clemson that much, right? We were expecting it was going to be a barn burner, one of those games like that. He's a walk-on, man. Like, he played last season, special teams, defense, and played his ass off all the way up until the Natty game, right, on Ringo's pick 6. Shows you that the elite coaches get this. If you're good, you're going to see the field. You're just this way it is. They look at talent. It don't matter about stars. It don't matter about scholarships. Like I said, Dan Jackson is a perfect example of that. But I also, when I look at South Carolina, right, if I'm not mistaken, Josh Vann comes back. Is that correct?
Correct.
Look, if you're not familiar with Josh Vann and you watch this Georgia game against South Carolina this past season, you're crazy for not knowing that name. He torched us. So keep up with that right there. You got E.J. Jenkins, which is a huge receiver. Then you got Marshawn Lloyd, bearing injury. I think he needs to be healthy to really make an impact, but he definitely has that impact capability. And then there's another guy at the receiver or running back position that Georgia fans know, Lavoisier, right? And that's going to be, for me, one person I want to keep an eye on, obviously, because he was a Georgia kid. Obviously Kirby has him at DB, and I think a lot of that was really because of a depth issue, but neither here nor there. Moving back to his normal position where he played at IMG running back. So it's going to be interesting to see, and looking at that right there, what the offense is about. You lose JJ Enigbari, I think that is. He's at the draft. So you look at, losing him right there, but you still have some good defense key pieces here. And then you also bring in, the recruiting class from this past season. Looking at on 3, there was a Georgia commit, Donovan Westmoreland, linebacker, and obviously, stars or whatever. Look, kid's gonna be good, right? Kid's gonna be good. I think he sees the field a lot earlier at South Carolina, but he's gonna be good. If Georgia, you have to look at this and say, if Georgia had him committed, there's a reason. So the fact that South Carolina flips him, regardless of the star position, look, that's a feather in Beamer's cap, right? Just saying. Gonna have to leave that there. Obviously you get your 4-star quarterback, Braden Davis. That's gonna be a good player for you post Spencer Rattler, in my opinion. Yeah, and then you get some more key pieces in the defense. Are there any impact players that you were thinking this season could have a breakout season, whether it's freshman all the way to senior? Who are your guys that you're keeping an eye out for, keeping on your radar, that are expected to have that kind of either breakout season or continuing upon that kind of success that they had in the previous year? What would be some guys, if I'm a Georgia fan, who should I keep an eye out for?
Well, like I said before, I mean, one of the guys that I'm very interested to see is Antoine Wells Jr. Coming from James Madison, and I was throwing some of the stats out there, but I'll make sure that I get them correct here. What he was able to do in his short career there in 2 seasons is just absolutely phenomenal. Only played 22 games, but in 22 games, he's third all time in receiving touchdowns with 21. He's ninth in receiving yards with almost 1,900. And he's ninth in career with in receptions with 116. He set the JMU single season record for receiving yards, 15 touchdowns this past year, and then he also had 83 receptions, then over 1,250 yards receiving. So I say all that because he's a guy that has the ability to stretch the field, and I think South Carolina desperately needs that. He's a guy that can play in the slot. He's a guy that can play on the outside. And when you mention a guy like Josh Vann, that's a guy that can really complement him. Jaheem Bell is another phenomenal player. I mean, he's a guy
had a
that
really good season toward the end of the season last year. Came out in a strong way.
I'm trying to figure out the best way to compare. I mean, especially being a guy that grew up in New England as a Patriots fan, I think it's very it's crap to compare anyone to Rob Gronkowski. But the point being is he has the ability to play attached to the line as a tight end. He can detach and be in the slot. I mean, you can even put him on the outside. I mean, he's a matchup nightmare because of how big he is and how quick he moves. On top of that, I mean, obviously Austin Stogner's coming in from Oklahoma. He has a good relationship and rapport with Rattler. I'll wait to see what he does in this offense, though. But I'd also say, from a running back standpoint, actually, it's funny. I'm actually doing an interview with Marshawn Lloyd, one of our NIL interviews, Garnet Trust. So if you guys are interested in just hearing some of that stuff, it's free. Recording that today will come out later this week. You can just go to GameCockCentral on YouTube. But he's come back from an injury, from that ACL from his freshman year, and mentally, I think he's back in the right place. And that's one of the things that I'm sure we'll get into. But Juju Mcdowell, he's going to be a sophomore this year. He is,
he really broke out last season. Of the season too. It's one of those last of the season breakouts, man. It's crazy.
He's a tiny guy. He's only going to get bigger, but he's just so shifty. He's smaller. So South Carolina, and I don't know how you feel about this. Because I mean, shoot, when I got here, I mean, Georgia always had a lot of depth at the running back position, and I feel like some people look at it's like, oh, if you don't have one guy, you don't have enough guys. It's like, first off, football's changed so much, and you'll appreciate this. I think I got it behind me. I got Herschel Walker on my wall because I did I emceed an event with the great George Rogers, and Herschel was there, so he signed a helmet for me.
There you go. Hey, I'll take that all day. I think Dogs fans will appreciate that. That's a go for us.
That's a big boy right there. But I say that because the days of the George Rogers, the Herschel Walkers, the Archie Griffins. I mean, you think about just some of these running back, it's just different now. That's not to say that you can't have one running back that can just change the game, but I mean, think about it. You've seen it with the NFL and it's trickling down to college. It's more so situational backs, right? You have a third down running back now and this and that. So that's not a bad thing. I say that because with Juju, he's a guy that can make plays out of the backfield from a receiving standpoint. He's a guy that can run the ball. He's shifty. So Juju Mcdowell, he makes an impact on special teams as well. So those are some of the guys that come to mind for me. The big question mark, the wild card, and he's been trying to figure out, and I don't know where the hell they're going to put him because they haven't specifically said yet, is the Kerryon Joyner and what he was able to do in that bowl game. Do I feel like he's a guy that can go out there and be an every week quarterback? No. But I do feel like he's so freaking athletic that you have to find ways to get him the ball. I feel like
put him on the field. Yeah. There's no
moving him back and forth between the quarterback room to receiver room, I think that can, screw up a guy's psyche a little bit. But I feel like, with him, I mean, he'll make an impact on special teams. At least that's what they're hoping that he'll do. They'll put him on special teams, receive some kickoff returns. I don't know where they're going to put him. I don't know. I mean, we did a Garnet Trust NIL interview with him a couple weeks ago, and he even said, he's like, they don't know where they're going to put me yet. So Luke Dodie's
this is somewhat of a good problem to have, right?
It is
because I watched that bowl game, and
so the issue is
North Carolina.
The issue is their quarterback Luke Dodie, who's going to be the starter last season before he got hurt. He's coming back from that foot injury still. He had surgery in the offseason, so he's been working his tail off, but he's not going to be ready to go for the spring game. So in my mind, just thinking about foot injuries, I mean, shoot, the thing about a foot injury, everyone, for number one, heals differently. You can say about any injury, but those
Yeah,
foot
absolutely.
injuries, that foot injury, you don't know what he's going to look like. So you have some talented quarterbacks that are coming in. Colton Gauthier is a guy that will be a sophomore this year on the depth chart at quarterback. You need to be able to provide some depth. If Rattler is going to be the guy, who can you put behind him? Joyner might be that guy, and that's no disrespect to Dodie, but it's just that you don't know what you're going to get from him because he's coming back from that injury. He wasn't able to move around last year. That's why he's having the surgery. If he can't move around, can he still be that same Luke Dodie that you envision him to be? So I would not be shocked to see Joyner in that quarterback room. Do you have some special packages for him? Wild card? You can. The good thing is this, though. If you do put Joyner out there, he's at least has tape now throwing the football because before that Duke's Mayo Bowl, he hadn't thrown a pass in 2 freaking years. So
Yep.
I don't think North Carolina was prepared for that. And obviously,
you could tell they weren't. You could tell they weren't. Watching that game, you could tell they were not.
We didn't know. We went to practices with open practices, and Beamer even joked around after the game. He's like, "We did a pretty good job, huh? We had Joyner working out with the receivers, and as soon as the media left after their 15 minutes of being able to view practice, all right, Joyner, back with the quarterback, son." So, I mean, they did a great job of keeping it a secret. I mean, that's one thing that that usually gets leaked out. None of us knew about it. None of us knew about it.
That's the perk of 15 minutes of media time, right? Like Kirby Smart. Look, if you're a Georgia fan, you understand where I'm coming with this. It is the most annoying thing you could ever imagine, especially if you try to cover anything Georgia, because you're always going to be wrong for the most part. You're always going to be wrong. And I think, looking at that right there, to your point with Joyner, I think you could honestly see him be the backup quarterback, situational plays, help decoy some plays. Because let's be honest, Rattler is athletic enough to do some crazy kind of contraption gadget play. He can make it happen, right? That's the perk of bringing in Rattler, because now you could sit there. If I'm an opposing defense, now I'm going to exclude Georgia. Georgia's just on a different level. But if I'm any other team on your schedule, and I even think maybe even Clemson on this point, right? Which I want to talk to you about too. That game right there, like the inconsistency of understanding what you're getting at the quarterback position and knowing that you could sit there and see Joyner play your quarterback role, it makes it entirely a different game plan for anybody, right? So, having Joyner is a really good problem to have, because you can put him at receiver, get him on the field, get him some touches. Sit there, put him at quarterback. Next thing you know, do a gadget play. That's a touchdown momentum swinging type thing in a game where it's a close game, or, you never know. And kind of doing this right here, we're looking at some comments over here from the brigade, and it seems like my dog fans here are giving some praise to some folks. Patrick Oliver saying that Beamer is definitely making a positive impact. You can see that. Tanil also says that Van is amazing. Yeah, look, he torched a Georgia defense that is, if you want to be honest, it was pretty much historic, if you want to say. Obviously, the anomaly being the SEC championship game. But look, he torched us for 100+, right? And that was with, I think, Zeb Noland at your quarterback. Like, that is a crazy thing. But this is a perfect segue comment that I want to start talking about, and then we'll wrap this up, my man. Clemson's vulnerable. Now, you covered South Carolina. What are your thoughts on that? Because we saw they only lost 3 games, but they definitely look vulnerable from an offensive standpoint, no question about it. And I think with the offensive additions that South Carolina had, I know last year was it was not pretty. But this year, I think you might see something different, especially with the recruiting class and getting Beamer's system in and things like that. What are your feelings? Way too early kind of vibes about the Palmetto Bowl, because I'm telling you now, I think that's going to be a sneaky, sneaky good game. Although I think it's at Death Valley this year.
Correct.
I think it'll be a sneaky, sneaky game. What are your thoughts and vibes on that one?
Well, I mean, like as I told you before, before we came on, because some people probably like, all right, he covers the Gamecocks. He's gonna say, everything's all sunshine and rainbows. I can promise you that won't be the case. I'm from Boston. Have no ties to South Carolina. Never went to USC. Covered Clemson when I first arrived here. Covered both teams. I've covered South Carolina since I arrived here in 2016 when I worked at the local TV station in town, Columbia, at WACH Fox. But I think with Clemson, I think what you saw with them last year, it has some people thinking, all right, the sky is falling down. Venables leaves and this and that, and Clemson's done. That's certainly not the case. And I'm not saying you're saying that, but I think some people look at it and be like, all right, Clemson's falling apart. We need to see, just like we talk about consistency with being good. You need to be consistently bad before you ever write a team off like Clemson, right? So,
Absolutely.
obviously the conference, is it the strongest? No. But at the same time, too, you got to be able to go out there and win games. And I think with Clemson, with South Carolina, I think there's still a team that still has too much talent. I think they got to figure out what's going to happen with the quarterback situation. I think some people are going to write off DJ Uyunglele because of how he performed last season. I think
That
more
and
than
Cade
anything,
Klubnik on his tail.
I think more than anything is, and this isn't to take any of the blame away from him, but I think this is just something that wasn't talked enough about. Like I said, as someone that covered Clemson, covered a couple of their national titles, covered Trevor Lawrence's national title win out in San Francisco in the Bay that year, I think the biggest thing that Clemson lost was not Trevor Lawrence. I think it was losing a guy like Travis Etienne, because he's like that second
He did it
quarterback.
all. He did it all.
He's that second quarterback on the field. And Will Shipley is going to be a phenomenal. I mean, obviously, he's come back from an injury. He's going to be a phenomenal player for Clemson. And he'll probably have an opportunity to go play at the next level. But Travis Etienne, what he was able to bring, he was able to pick up a lot of things, because what blows my mind is you see what, Uyunglele was able to do in the two games when Trevor Lawrence had to miss games because of COVID during that season. And what did he do? He was the ACC Freshman of the Week,
Yep.
back-to-back
Yep.
weeks, throwing for over 300 yards, throwing for over 400 yards. I know they lost to Notre Dame, but, I mean, he put on an absolute freaking clinic. He was able to do some amazing things as a freshman.
It was only in overtime too. So.
Yeah. So I say all that because he's capable of doing it. What's the difference between that year and last year? There was no Travis Etienne. So there's going to be people that will instantly write off DJ. I feel like he's going to bounce back this year. Now, does that mean he's going to be the guy that a lot of people envision him to be, to carry that torch? You think of the Deshaun Watsons of the world. You think about Trevor Lawrence. You just think about what they've been able to produce from a quarterback standpoint over the last couple seasons. That's not to say that, but I'm interested to see how he responds this season. And if he's not the guy, like you mentioned, they have a tremendous freshman coming in there. But big picture, look, I think the gap is closing with South Carolina and in Clemson. I just don't know if South Carolina is there quite yet. And maybe I feel differently once the season gets rolling and we're able to see what a guy like, Spencer Rattler, and more importantly, just the offense as a whole looks like.
Yep.
And then from a defensive standpoint, Clayton White, the defensive coordinator for USC, did a tremendous job of being able to get this team back in a position of where they need to be. You mentioned it before. Enambare, one of the top players in the draft this year from a defensive standpoint, he's not going to be there next season. And even though sometimes statistically you look at, he didn't have this, he took on, my college coach would call it, sometimes you got to be the traffic cone out there. You take on two guys and it frees up one of your teammates. Belichick says it all the time, do your 111th. So I know I'm kind of getting all over the place, but the point being is with South Carolina, I think what they need to be able to do is show that consistency from a defensive standpoint. You made progress last year. Be better this year and continue to take those steps forward. And then once you get to that middle part of the year, let's see where you are. Let's see where Clemson is. And I'm not even talking about from a wins-loss standpoint. I just want to be able to see how much that gap is truly closing. But right now, I still give Clemson that edge. And it's not just even by a touchdown. I have to say even 2 touchdowns. But we'll see what Clemson looks like by the time we get to, I don't know, middle of October, heading into November.
Oh, no doubt about that. I think we haven't mentioned these guys yet, but you're going to need these guys to have breakout seasons to sustain this level of success that I'm about to say. I feel like South Carolina can be an 8-4 team, but I need 2 players, in my opinion, to step the hell up in a big way. Spencer Rattler on the offense needs to take command of that offense immediately and execute. And on defense, Jordan Burch has got to be that guy. Jordan Burch, it's time for him to step up. It's time for him to be that 5-star that y'all got obviously out of that 2020 class. He has to make a leaps and bounds from what it was been. I know you had Enigbari. I think Zach Pickens is still there.
Correct.
So that's another name that's going to help this right here, because if you had both of those guys and they have breakout seasons, there's no reason to tell me that South Carolina can't go 8-4 in the regular season. That's just my thoughts on it, and that's what I'll put a prediction on it, right? I think Georgia State's a win. Arkansas, I think, is a loss. Arkansas is one of the most underrated, slept-on teams in the whole country, and people don't give Sam Pittman enough credit. And that's going to be a tough game, but you're playing in Arkansas. I think it's a good game, but it's one of those games. It's just Arkansas is really good. Then you play Georgia. Georgia's on a different level until proven otherwise. But then you go to, then you play Charlotte. South Carolina State. Look, South Carolina State is a really good team out of Orangeburg. I just think that the talent level is still a little bit there. And I think it could be a trick. It could be a trap game. But I do think that South Carolina wins that game. So that's what 3 wins right there. I think y'all beat Kentucky. Honestly, I think y'all get it done in Kentucky. I think that's one of the games right there. Those surprise victories, right? I think that's a surprise victory for y'all this season. Looking at A&M, A&M comes to Willie B, but A&M, if they get their quarterback situation figured out, I think that game's a loss. But it can be a toss-up if they can't get the quarterback situation. But talent-wise, I think they're right up there with Alabama and Ole Miss. So for the sake of it, I give it an L. But I think it'll be a good game. I think you beat Missouri handily. You beat Vanderbilt handily. I think you beat Florida and Tennessee. Tennessee, the question mark, because let's be honest, if they can get their defense to stay somewhat in shape, because that offense is super high, like it's just high power. Mm-hmm. If y'all can sit there and sustain drives and score and keep that offense off the field, there's no reason to say that y'all can't win. So I've got y'all winning 8-4. I think with the Palmetto Bowl, it's going to be a really good game. I just think that playing at Clemson and Clemson being where they are, I just think there's still that gap that needs to be closed. But I do agree with you that the gap can close some this year. I do think so.
Yeah, and look, and I think I just feel like with this South Carolina, I wouldn't even just say team, I would just say program as a whole, and some of it's not necessarily fair to Beamer, but it's just the reality of it, because you're part of it, right? You're part of it. Until they prove otherwise, you're still South Carolina. And that's not to say South Carolina can't be good. I mean, we saw what they were able to do in the early 2010 period with, some of the amazing talent that they had, the Clownies of the world, the Marcus Lattimore's, Steven Garcia's, Connor Shaw's, DJ Swearinger. I mean, the names in the list just keeps going on and on and on. Alshon Jeffrey. But you need to be able to prove consistently. Debo. And I know it's such a BS cliche phrase to use, but that's the God's honest truth, because even with South Carolina, I know it's a little bit different, but Georgia fans can relate to this, or at least for, before ending the season like they did this year. Anytime South Carolina just sniffed hope, their dreams would just come crack. That's what it is. Anytime hope is there, they just get knocked right off. So going into that Clemson game, there were a lot of people that feel like, all right, that gap between Clemson is closed or closing. It's smaller. Maybe it was, but you know what? Just because it's there doesn't mean you just show up and it's going to happen. You still need to be able to perform. So do I think Clemson is 30 points better than South Carolina? At least at that point, no. I just think the moment was a little too big for South Carolina. And for a team that, like we mentioned, the 2 previous seasons had 6 wins combined. At that point, they had 6 wins. I don't know if they were ready for that moment. And, this is going to be a different feeling. And Marcus Lattimore and I talk about it on our new podcast together. It's called Believe in South Carolina, BLEAV on the Believe Network podcast. You need to be able to handle success. You need to be able to handle people kissing your ass, telling you how great you are. This was new for South Carolina going into that. That's not saying that South Carolina had arrived or they were on the same playing field or playing stature of Georgia or Alabama for even that matter. But they were put in a position where a lot of these players, they had never felt any type of quote unquote success. since the being at South Carolina. So you need to be able to handle it. And in this offseason, we talked about before, the buzz externally, internally, it's there. They haven't done anything yet, though. So you need to be able to realize, like, okay, this is going to be the expectations. The spring ball game, I mean, that's going to be incredible, right before Easter. First time that, unless it's happened, years and years ago. I mean, I was talking to a longtime sportscaster in Nashville yesterday during the women's basketball tournament, who's covered the Gamecocks for many years and went to USC. He said this is the first time they're ever having a spring game at night. So the atmosphere that day is going to be incredible. I don't know how many people are going to be there. It's going to be tough a little bit the night before Easter. But, I mean, shoot, women's basketball, if they go on a Final Four run in Minnesota, that's going to be done by then. The Masters is a week before. That's going to be done by then. The only show in town is a baseball game against Ole Miss that afternoon. So that game's going to be tremendous. So if any Georgia people are coming out this way for Easter and you want to see a football game, come on by Williams-Brice. It's free to go in. It's going to be a big concert earlier that day. It's going to be great. But I say all that because that's going to be their first time, like, feeling that energy of, okay, people have high expectations for us now. This isn't, South Carolina of last year where it's like, all right, hey, just show some progress. No, that bar is risen, and that's a good thing. But now you have to deliver and keep taking steps forward. You don't want to go back. Go ask Will Muschamp. I mean, after what they were able to do after his second season winning that Outback Bowl championship, they took steps back, and he recruited some tremendous players. And I think that's one thing that I don't think Gamecock fans appreciate, and I think Georgia fans will love it even more. And they shouldn't just overwrite the fact that, like, all right, this has been the recruiting class that Georgia's been able to get the last couple of years. Muschamp is a phenomenal recruiter. And being able to put him on staff with a guy like Kirby Smart and some of the other coaches there, I mean, that is a huge, huge plus that just gets lost sometimes in the mix of what he's able to do.
Obviously, I think you're right there, right? Georgia fans love some Muschamp, right? Look, we understand that, like I said earlier, toward the beginning of the show, might not be the best head coach, but you cannot deny that man is not an excellent recruiter and an elite play caller. And, and I think that's one of the things that, Gamecock fans, I understand the resentment because he did recruit some really, really good teams and players there and just failed to capitalize anything with it. So that's just looking back at that right there. But at the same time, look, I think, the Gamecocks are overall, I think the Gamecocks are in a good place. I think with the way that the East is right now, I think there's the prime opportunity for South Carolina to take that step up a different tier in the East, right? You might not hit Georgia's level, which at this point, it's going to be very hard for somebody to do. It could happen, but it's going to be very difficult on paper right now to see that. But you're right in that area where you have, you would probably put Tennessee, Kentucky, and South Carolina, in my opinion, in that second tier where anybody can be jostling for that position, preseason wise, where obviously we got to see what happens, right? Injuries, transfer portal. There's so much still going on. But look, overall, from an outsider standpoint, I think South Carolina's in good hands with Beamer, for one. This year I think is going to be a stepping stone type year, because if you can get Braden Davis to develop, which I think, like I said, Beamer can do that. I think Beamer's going to get those guys developed, but give that year, right, with Spencer Rattler, and get him and take another step up. And then you sit there and get that development and get this culture changed completely. All these things right here, all that can matter for South Carolina to be from what I think y'all finished like 4th or 5th in the, I think 5th in the East last year. I think there's no reason why you can't finish 3rd or maybe 4th or maybe anywhere from 2nd to 4th, in my opinion. Like, you can take that step up. And I think, we'll definitely have to see what happens because there's just a lot of unknown factors right now, right? It's way too early, but it's still something that, college football fans need to understand, right? And as a Georgia fan, a lot of people, want to overlook everybody. Really, last year, I heard so many people just like, oh yeah, like just blow everybody out. And while that did happen, look, Josh Van came out and torched us for 100 plus, right? Tennessee torched us, right? Just because you think you're perfect, you're not perfect. But at the same time, like I said, kind of transition back to overall. South Carolina's in a good place. I've got y'all winning 8 games, which is another step up. I think it's very doable. It's all dependent on those factors. How the spring practice goes. Obviously, guys key positions, staying healthy, development, things like that, right? It's kind of the typical norm. But I think you can win 8 games. I think it's doable. With that being said, though, if someone's interested in looking at your work, finding you, connecting with you, where can people do that?
My Twitter handle is Mike_UVA. So my last name, Uva, just like the college, just wasn't smart enough to get in. It's spelled the exact same way. Nice Italian boy here. So that's where you can see a lot of my stuff. If you have any listeners that have subscribed to On3, it's kind of the new thing, right? I mean, you may have heard about 24/7 or Rivals.
It's a new shiny toy.
Yeah, this is Shan's new toy, and it is it's been something with where I'm working at GameCockCentral. We moved over just last month. It's been a lot of fun, and one of the beautiful things is if you're a On3 subscriber, if you have one school, you have the ability to see the other work that's going on at other schools. Kind of take a peek over the fence, if you will. So we have a lot of great content up there. I'm actually, like I said, I just started a new podcast with Marcus Lattimore, and Marcus shared a lot of stuff. I mean, why he didn't think the Will Muschamp era worked out, and he's got a great relationship with Will still, but he really peeled it back a little bit why he personally left South Carolina. And I give him a lot of credit for manning up and saying what he said, because it takes a lot for a person to do that, as well as some good Steve Spurrier stories. So it's always
can't go wrong with the old ball coach, man.
No, so yeah, so I'm over at Gamecock Central, and we have a lot of fun. If you follow me on Twitter, we have a lot of fun. We also give out a lot of Bojangles because of my sponsorship with them. So we do not hold any grudges here in the state of South Carolina. If you're a Georgia or Alabama, even if you're a Clemson fan, I know Gamecock fans don't like me probably saying that, but it's just the reality. I got no dog in the fight. I just cover the team. So yeah,
there you go. Now I will say this though, man, do yourself a favor if you're listening to this. I'm not a pimento cheese type person, but I will say this: if you've never been to Bojangles, I highly suggest you try it. We talked about this at the beginning of the show, and I'm gonna stick with it. If you're a biscuit person, start off with a bacon egg, or get you a Cajun filet biscuit. If you like going a little bit extra, go egg and cheese on it, and get you some seasoned fries. But Bo Rounds are an excellent choice as well. And that sweet tea is almost always on point, though. Almost always on point.
Can't
I don't know
go
if you're
wrong.
a sweet tea guy or not, but I'm telling you right now, their sweet tea is typically on point. Just going to leave it there. At least the ones around me. I can only speak for that. With that being said, though, hey, Mike, it was a pleasure having you on, man. I'm glad we were able to sit here and kind of get a feel for the Gamecocks and, kind of just overall feel and, from a Mile High standpoint, from as a third-party fan base, what to expect, right? I think it's key that each team understands each other because we play you every year. So, let's see, Tanil also says you're like our Mike Griffith. Kind of. Mike Griffith's our one of our insiders, but you could tell he's kind of unbiased as well, which I like it. I like unbiased. It makes things realistic, and that's what people need to hear. With that being said, though, Mike, like I said, it was a pleasure to have you on. Go check out, get the Uva and then tag them on Twitter. Let them know that you got it. See what you think about it. With that being said, though, as always, Brigade, it was a pleasure having you on. You were hot and heavy. Go Dogs, and we'll have a good rest of your week, Mike. I know you're busy, but have a good rest of your week, my man.
No, I appreciate it. And like I said, I've been trying to multitask a little bit, so I apologize that my eyes have been wandering like crazy eyes of Mr. Deeds here. But no, I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun, and like I told you before, I have no ties to South Carolina, so it's always fun being able to just talk football, with different fan bases. Because moving down here in 2015, covering Ole Miss, Mississippi State, I fell in love with the SEC a long time ago. But being down here, and I say this in the nicest way possible, SEC fans are absolutely friggin' batshit crazy. I don't know if I can say that on your podcast. Okay,
no, dude, trust me, I've said worse. It's okay.
Absolute batshit crazy, and I friggin' love it. And as someone that grew up playing college football, my dad just finished up his 38th year of coaching high school ball up in Massachusetts. I friggin' love it. So I've never been out to Athens. Would love to get out there at some point. Hopefully I'll be able to do it in the near future, and would
Worth
love
the
to meet
trip.
some of you guys. So absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, obviously Patrick is not unbiased at all. Definitely not. I know this. And then Tanel wishes the Gamecocks good luck, except for against Georgia, of course, and go Dogs. And with that being said, that is the perfect way to wrap up this podcast. Remember, guys, go subscribe, GameCockCentral.com if you're interested in that. If you have an On3 subscription, go check it out. Looking forward to seeing week 3 in Willie B.
Yeah, when you come out, man, let me know. You know, the Bojangles is right next to the football stadium, so we do a lot on game days. So definitely want to meet. Like I said, I love being able to meet different SEC fans. I know Gamecock fans don't like that when I say that, but I mean, like I said, I got no dang dog in the fight, and I love Gamecock fans. They've been very nice to me, but I just love talking SEC football. It doesn't matter with who. So just college football in general.
There you go. All right, folks. With that being said, have a great rest of your day, whatever you or morning, depending on when you're listening to this. That being said, go Dogs.